So in the spirit of getting started for tonight, kind of wanted to start by asking what you learned during your time with helping students vote. And I would push you to not say election law. We've all learned about election law. Let's push a little bit past that. So whoever wants to kick it off, go ahead.
I can go first. Okay, so for everyone, I'm Sunny. I'm the SAB member for Florida, and I don't have my camera on because I'm home and the internet is terrible here. So just so you can hear me, I'm just gonna go camera off. But one thing that I've learned the most probably is that a lot of people are much more receptive than you would think to like learning about voting and like registering to vote. I think it's just like being able to reach out and talk to them is like the first step, and then once you do it's really surprising how like open people are to doing it and to learning. So I think that's one thing that I've learned during my time helping students vote. And I can popcorn if you want.
You can popcorn, or if someone else just wants to hop in, either way.
I'll hop in. One thing I've learned at our voting events that it's important to tie voting into things that students care about. Sometimes when I may ask, like, are they registered to vote? They automatically say yes, because, they wasn't anticipating running into us or, stopping their day to register, even if they aren't. But if we tell them that, did you know this coming up vote or the next election could affect your tuition? Then they do it a 180 and they're more likely to be inclined to register to vote so they can have their voice heard.
I guess I'll jump in. I'm Rosanna Parati. I'm the director of civic engagement at Hofstra University, and we're doing some reorganization in our school. And because of the administrative reorganization, I think we're going to be able to do a little bit more with voter registration. But I've been doing tabling with my class. I teach political science for like, I don't know, 5 or 6 semesters. What I have learned is that there are apparently a lot of ways to reach students, and that I need to learn more about the different ways to reach students besides tabling, which is what we do regularly.
I'll jump in. I just wanted to preface against everybody was in the call. I would love to show my face, but my hair isn't done. So just want to let that be known. But what I've learned during my time helping students vote, I've definitely learned a lot of open-mindedness and understanding that everybody's situation isn't the same when it comes to understanding voting, how to vote, and like, how to get involved in voting. A lot of times people can be given false information. A lot of times people can be given what's the word? I guess taking the wrong direction in terms of like how to vote or if they can vote, where their vote matters, how it matters. So just being open-minded and receptive to like people's not understanding and understanding the process and being able to inform them as well. That's definitely something I've learned a lot.
I can go next. So I am very new to the whole CVP thing and being part of the student advisory board. So I haven't really necessarily helped students vote, but something that I have noticed when you try to give them information and get them to vote when the time is right is that they sometimes tend to have a lot of biases that are not necessarily helpful to them. And that's not, but it's also important to know that that's not necessarily their fault. And I was lucky enough to realize that from very early on. And one of them that I've noticed a lot is that a lot of students just simply don't care about voting. And there's many reasons why they don't care about it. But one of the ones that I have seen a lot is because they think that their vote doesn't matter. And I mean, obviously that opens a whole discussion that we will not talk about right now, but I just kind of wanted to share that is what I've learned.
I can go now. I think one of the things that I've learned is that most people are very focused on the presidential election and they don't even like realize how many other elections are like happening. when, in my opinion, I feel like all of the other elections that like decide our state reps are way more important than the presidential election.
Valerie, there's a reason we get along so well. Because I totally agree with you. So Cassie, she, her pronouns, curriculum and research manager, and I'm currently supervising SAB. I think, so I've been doing this for a while now. And I think the thing that comes to mind for me is when you think about doing voter registration, especially in states where you can't do it online, when it has to be done in person, the most equitable way to do it, in my opinion, is to be in the classroom, doing classroom reps, getting students registered there, because that is the one place where all students you would hope they would be. Extracurriculars, I like didn't have time to be present at extracurricular activities when I was in school because I was like playing a sport and working multiple jobs. And I was just like first gen low income, like other people are dealing with even more than what I dealt with. So that's kind of my take.
I can jump in too. I think that first of all, everything everyone said is great. But for me, I think one thing I've learned is a lot of how to do things on like the back end of planning events and whatnot, of realizing how many different parties are involved with each thing that you plan, and how you may have to coordinate with, 4 or 5 different offices on campus, and essentially how to be successful in an environment like that. It involves some planning for me. And it involves some time commitment to make sure I set enough time aside to be successful with that. So I've seen myself grow a lot with that.
I can go next. I'm Alicia Bolette, she, her pronouns. I am the community college rep for SAB. I am also our vice chair. And my answer is very similar to Brooklyn's, because I've noticed while helping students vote and prepare to vote that not everyone has equal access to information, and not everyone has the same civic literacy foundation. So at my community college, for instance, some of our students are either immigrants or first gen, and they don't necessarily know the mechanics or the culture around voting here in the United States. And that's just one example of many. And I think learning this lesson, I've been able to apply it more broadly and take more of an equity lens to any sort of organizing work I do, where you just can't assume that everybody is playing on a level playing field and has the same resources and understanding that you might on something. So that's my answer.
I can go. Hi, I'm Kara. I'm new here. I'm a student at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, and I'm entering a new role as the Civic and Democratic Engagement intern. And I realized that a lot of people view voting as like this really intimidating process when it's very simplistic. And we're also trying to shift the conversation to build up people's civic identity. So shifting it from I voted to I am a voter. So we're still working on that.
Well, since Cassie shared, I'll share too. Hey y'all, Lauren Schuler, she, her pronouns. I am the curriculum and research associate, and I'll be talking a little bit more later about a different role that I have. But I've worked for over a decade with college students in the civic engagement space. And I think that one of the things that I've really seen is that over the course of that time, students are more engaged in civic engagement in the voting space than they had been. And so like I know that we hear a lot of times that like young people are apathetic, and I don't believe that. I think that our young people are active in civic ways that are not necessarily like just voting, but volunteering and organizing and being advocates for different issues. And so I have found that it is really important to tie voting to issues and to the impact that it has on the things that people care about. And so helping students craft and kind of figure out what those issues are that like are really important to them, and then allowing them to expand and grow out from there.
Awesome. I think that was everyone, but does anyone else want to share anything with that?
I was just going to read what Terry put into chat in case anyone doesn't have the ability to see chat, like you're on your phone or something. So Terry is our amazing new Ohio Deputy State Coordinator. She uses she, her pronouns, and she's joining from her phone today, and her network is unstable. But she says that she's new to the sphere, but I echo the sentiments of many who have spoken about access to education and civic engagement being a large obstacle for students, specifically historically marginalized communities. I'm happy to discuss with everyone and learn more about what y'all are working on to engage more students. It's nice to meet y'all. So y'all, Terry is awesome. Just throwing that out there.
Awesome. Well, with that, we can go into our guest speaker, Eugenia, who has been joining us today. Thank you so much for coming. Eugenia is going to be talking a little bit today about her experience as a U.S. Foreign Service intern. She did recently graduate with honors from Southwestern University and spent a great deal of time working with us in the CVP realm. And in her free time, she enjoys art museums and crossword puzzles. So let's give a virtual hand to Eugenia.
Hello, I'm Eugenia. I love being described as special guest, so thank you for that ego boost. So yes, all of those things on the slide are true and accurate information. I just graduated in May 2023, and I actually just got back from interning with the U.S. Department of State as a Foreign Service intern in Naples, Italy, at the U.S. Consulate General there. So that kind of makes it a full circle like year of experience with the Department of State. Prior to that, though, I was a democracy fellow on campus at Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas for I think a semester. I don't remember if it was one or two. And then after that, I transitioned into an intern role with Cassie. Then I never left Cassie alone after that. It's mutual though. I think we're friends, so like we're not. It's fine. But so I was a national programming intern with CVP for about a year. So I also have experience in the student voting space in that regard. So I guess sort of the topic here of the things I'm going to try to say to you as quickly as possible so we can have time to ask questions and stuff is just like transitioning from working with CVP and in the student voting space, like taking some of those skills and seeing how they transfer to other sort of like sectors of public service and government work. So I applied for this program called the U.S. Foreign Service Internship Program in the fall of my junior year at Southwestern. I double majored in political science and history with a minor in Spanish. So my majors are sort of like tilted heavily towards public service, international relations, government work, that kind of thing. But I think that there are a lot of different ways you could sort of parlay a major in communications or like other related fields into working with the Department of State. Sorry, I should pause and zoom out for a second. If you don't know anything about the Department of State, which to be honest, I didn't really. Oh, my video is spotlighted. Okay. Thank you. I didn't know a ton about the Department of State before I started interning for them. Running theme with me in my career and academic and professionals, and I tend to do everything at the very last minute. So I would say I knew very little about the Department of State and Foreign Service aside from what I had seen in the Netflix show Madam Secretary. But so if you don't know anything about the Department of State or the Foreign Service, that's fine. The Department of State is a branch of the government that sort of manages our like international diplomatic foreign relations with our like the U.S. partners abroad. And so that can also like they provide passport services to American citizens either at home or abroad, and then like visa services. Alicia, is it Alicia or Alicia?
Alicia.
Alicia. it's not like the show Madam Secretary, unfortunately. Because in Madam Secretary, they have like way more office space and it looks nicer. And in my experience, it's possible that the Secretary of State's office is like actually like that show. However, I never got to go in there because it wasn't important enough. So where I worked, it was like cubicles and fluorescent overhead lighting and vinyl flooring. So in set design, at least, it's not like Madam Secretary. Um, Excellent question. And then, so like within the Department of State, there is like the U.S. Foreign Service. U.S. Foreign Service officers actually go abroad to embassies and consulates. A consulate is like an embassy that's smaller. I also didn't know that until this summer when I went to work in a consulate. So they go abroad and they'll actually do like on the ground sort of like liaising with the host countries, whether that's in the political sphere to sort of get more strategic information for the US and the government's interests abroad, or in the sphere of public diplomacy. So that's sort of creating like and fostering educational and cultural exchanges between the US government and like US citizens and the people and government of the host country. So it's just sort of like a broader overview of what they do. So they have a number of different internship opportunities, and I'll kind of try to sum them all up at the end of this in case there are ones you might be interested in, aside from the one that I did. But yeah, so I got this email and they were like, you have 1 week to apply for the USFSIP program, which is exactly what it sounds like, US Foreign Service Internship Program. Not a very creative name, but like it does what it says it does. So I applied for that. Most like application processes with if you're like looking to be a direct hire of a federal agency, they go through this website called USA Jobs, and I'll talk a little bit at the end about that as well, like how you can set up a profile in there, and like get your resume uploaded and stuff, so that way when a hiring announcement comes out and they're like you have a week to apply or you have like until 100 other people apply, you can do it a little bit faster, which can be quite useful. So I did a bunch of essays, did my resume, all that stuff, and applied for it. I just heard about it through my school's career center. There's also a way to sign up for like new open position alerts from like USA Jobs and from the Department of State. And so that's a really good way to sort of constantly have your eye on like what's coming up, even if you can't take that position at the time. If you think you want to work in international relations, you can at least see what's coming down the pipeline and what might be open soon, for people with similar experience. So the way the program is structured, it's like 2 summers, 10 weeks each summer. The first summer is a domestic assignment in Washington, D.C. And the second summer is like a post abroad. So you sort of bid on that, like foreign service officers in like actual foreign service officers. They get a list of countries and then they say, my top choice is the embassy in whatever, the embassy in Rome, because I think I'd be best suited based on my language capabilities and like my prior work experience. And then they're compared to everybody else who bids on that post, and then whoever is best qualified, sometimes whoever knows the most people who already work at that post, ends up at that post. So my first summer, I did a domestic assignment in DC at the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues, which was really super cool. And I think the other awesome thing about this program, right? Because I think when I was applying for it, I was like, I'm probably not going to get this. I don't go to like a fancy school. There are a lot of people in my program who go to like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, like all the big names. And so when I got in, I honestly was like, what am I going to do? Because I don't go to a fancy school. Like I have no idea what I'm doing. But the program also provides 3 weeks of like training when you first get into it. So you get like a writing course, a diplomatic history crash course, and then like some other things. Like you get, I don't know, you get like a crash course in the background of like how diplomacy and international relations work. So you get some training before you like hit the ground running at whatever like your office is. So I worked in the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues. If you ever have the opportunity to intern there or work there full time, it is like probably, I personally, I'm biased, but I think it's the greatest office at the Department of State. It is like the like least, it is the healthiest working environment I've ever been in, which is really nice. Despite the fact that there are a lot of people who have very important jobs in that office. So I worked on the women's economic empowerment team, which was also an interesting experience for me because I've never taken an econ class, so I did not know what I was doing. But they're super inclusive, and a big part of diplomacy, right, is that like there are econ officers, but then within that, like within the nitty gritty of econ and stuff, you also still need people who can do the communications and politics side of econ. So I like worked pretty closely with another intern who actually was an econ major. And so when we would write reports and stuff, she would do the statistics part, but then I would do the, okay, this is how we make it pretty and like connect it to women's empowerment and like align it rhetorically speaking with the strategic priorities of our office. So I think that's something that I learned while working with the Department of State is that like even within a specific career track, there are like a lot of different like facets and aspects to whatever that might be. So even when you're doing econ work, there's a public diplomacy side. Even when you're doing political work, there's an economic side. So there's a lot of places for people who are interested in working in international relations to sort of like slot into that career track. So while I was working in that office, I was really interested in the developing issue of the care economy based off of some. Also, I have no idea how long I'm supposed to talk, so somebody just wave at me and tell me to stop talking when I should stop. But so I worked on the care economy while I was there. It was a good office in terms of also I got to do some like substantive autonomous work. So and then I also got to, after researching the issue of like revaluing domestic labor and care work, I got to make a number of different like deliverables. So I got to do a shorter thing for public release, a longer report for internal release, and then some like varied presentations to like internal people just like in my office, and then like external interlocutors from other government agencies. So I think that was a really like cool experience as well to get to like have this focus on just one thing, but then figure out how do I package it for a bunch of different audiences. That was something I really valued. And the other great thing about this program is like I sound like a brand ambassador for this program or something. Like I'm receiving no compensation for this, unfortunately. I just think you should apply for it. It's cool. The other great thing is that they pay for your housing for both summers, and they also pay for your travel to and from wherever you work. So like my flight to and from like DC was paid for, and my housing was paid for all 10 weeks. And then you also get paid like to work on top of that. So it can be a really great opportunity as well for folks who are coming from, like the program is specifically targeted towards people who are historically underrepresented in the Foreign Service. So whether that's because you're a first gen student, because you're low income, because you're like a gender minority or an ethnic minority, like that's sort of what the specific program is focused on. So there's a lot of like financial support and like skill building support, which is really nice as well. So same for going to Italy, right? Like I do not have European summer vacation money. The government paid for me to fly to Italy, live in Italy, work in Italy, and then fly home. Otherwise, I couldn't have done it. So it is more accessible than it seems on its face, I think. So yeah. And then this second summer, so like in order to sort of prepare us for potentially becoming foreign service officers someday, the goal of the program, right, is that like they want you to be a foreign service officer. So you have to take the foreign service officer test and all of that stuff. And then they gave us a list of locations, like a bunch of different embassies and consulates everywhere in the world, like locations as varied as like London and then like Gaborone and Botswana. So like everything in between those things. And then we like bid on different posts. We rated them. In some ways, we were like competing against other people in the program, right? Like if everybody says like I want to go to London, then like you have to, like a real foreign service officer, figure out how do I present myself as the best candidate for this. So that was good experience as well in terms of like crafting a narrative about your experiences and what you can bring to a position. And then the fun thing about the Foreign Service is you can get reassigned at any time. So I bid on Consulate Belfast, and they said, cool, you're not going to Consulate Belfast after all because they don't have a couch for you to sleep on. So I went to Italy instead, which was cool. It was still really cool. but it is very much like an actual employment experience with the Foreign Service, which is awesome if you're interested in international relations or diplomacy, right? Because you're like really getting kind of what it feels like to be a Foreign Service officer. So I went to Italy in June. I was working at the consulate. There's also an embassy in Italy, so that's sort of like a bigger experience in comparison to working in a consulate. And I worked with the public diplomacy section. I also had some overlap with the political and econ officers. In case you're like, what is public diplomacy? As I was 1 year ago before I started this internship, public diplomacy is like PR and like communications for the government, and then they do the like education and cultural stuff as well. It was super interesting. I had never been out of the US before ever. like just got my passport literally this year. And then ended up in Italy and was like, what do I do? But it was cool. It wasn't, I mean, in terms of like first places to go, it wasn't like super overwhelming. It's still Western Europe. But I think the coolest thing about working at the consulate, right, is that like my understanding of what the US government did abroad for foreign relations was much more limited. Even working like at the Department of State in Washington, like your priorities when you're still here domestically are kind of different from what they are when you're actually like at post and on the ground. And I didn't realize how like particularly smaller posts and consulates in parts of countries that are a little bit more neglected, like even though Italy is like, she's a big vacation spot, everybody loves her, but the south of Italy is sort of like politically and economically disadvantaged in a way I found very surprising in comparison to like Venice, Rome, Milan, Florence, like all the places you think of when you think of Italy. And so I was surprised to see what the government can do without actually like spending that much money to create like opportunities that connect like people from the US and Italian citizens. So there's like also a benefit for like both people bilaterally instead of just for one party, which is nice. So I got to go to this meeting. We hosted this delegation from this like science museum in Columbus, Ohio. It felt very random to me. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, with a bunch of people from a science museum in Columbus, Ohio, in Naples, Italy, and I was like, "What are they doing here?" But they did a really cool like free event for some teenagers in Italy, like about pursuing STEM with like a focus on women in STEM. And then afterwards, my colleagues from the consulate took them out for coffee because in Italy you do everything over coffee, which is like amazing if you like coffee, but terrible for your sleep schedule. And we went to get coffee, and then they brought with them a woman who works in Italy. She's like an astrophysicist, which is like and so they like just connected. They just served as sort of like the connecting piece between this group of like museum professionals from Columbus, Ohio, and this woman who works in astrophysics in Italy. And so like they were able to like facilitate a dialogue between them and set something up so that like the folks from Columbus are going to come back to Naples, and they're going to have this astrophysicist as like a guest speaker at one of their like science events at this conference they're going to. And like we were able to do that and help them like confirm those dates and like figure out what that schedule is going to look like without having to spend any US taxpayer dollars, which I thought was really cool. I didn't realize how far you can stretch just being the connector and like building those communities and networks like without having that many resources. And like and also like getting to use people's resources fairly, right? So like not spending a bunch of money on like glad handing people, which is kind of what I thought politics and international relations was a bit like before I got to see it happen. Like you can do a lot just by talking to people and by saying like, hey, I think like you're a really cool person. This is a really cool organization. What can I do without like overextending myself to be in the middle? So yeah, okay, let me stop talking. I would say in conclusion, in summary, those were some cool things that I did. If you have any interest in this program or in other like paths into careers in the Foreign Service, there's a lot of highly accessible information online, and I can pass that along to Roy and to Cassie after this call, so we can sort of circulate that. I would say there's definitely like room in international relations, more room than I thought for people from different disciplines as well and from different backgrounds. So if it's something you're interested in, you shouldn't be afraid of it. And yeah, I hope some of this gave you like a more concrete idea of what it really means when people say like, I work in diplomacy or I work with the Department of State. Yeah, and so I'd love to take any questions if you have them. Are foreign language skills necessary for these programs? No. So I would say it helps. Like, it definitely helps. But I didn't speak any Italian. And because there's a great aspect of it, right, is specifically with this internship program, you're considered a direct hire of the Foreign Service. So you get access to the same things that other full-time direct hire employees do. So I got to actually steal a couple of hours of Italian language training from my boss who was like on leave while I was there. So you get access to some cool things as well. The only thing they don't give you is insurance, which is very unfortunate. But you get access to other things, which is cool. So yeah, foreign language not required, but definitely a plus. Couldn't figure out how to unmute myself. Average day during my time as a Foreign Service intern. I hate when people answer these questions by saying, actually, every day looked different for me, but like every day did kind of look different. The other thing about working in diplomacy is like there are like sort of fits and starts. So like you'll have a really slow period where nothing is happening. Like another thing that the Foreign Service does when working abroad is they like offer grants to non-governmental organizations and other things like that. So like sometimes there are periods where they're like reviewing a lot of grant proposals. Like in public diplomacy, this is what they do. Like they'll be reviewing a lot of proposals or like dispersing a lot of funds and stuff. But then once they finish with all of that, there's like a long, slow period. So I arrived in a period where there weren't a ton of programs happening. They'd like already happened before I got there and then phased out. So it was slower some days, but other days, like I got to write speeches for one of our political officers and a public diplomacy officer. Like because I was working with Italians, I got to like proofread stuff that was like translated from Italian to English for clarity. So lots of different things, but I want to stop talking so that Dante can ask a question. Go ahead.
Hey, Eugenia, am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Hey, thank you so much for sharing your experience. It sounds like a wonderful, once in a lifetime type of opportunity. My question I wanted to ask is there a career path that would be most relevant to this pursuit, or is it open to anybody, or could you think of maybe a couple career paths would be like best suited to this, or that maybe opportunity like this being able to take advantage of would be helpful, later down the line as entering that specific professions?
That's an awesome question, and I want to combine it with what Sunny said in the chat about. So the program that I am in is actually only for rising sophomores and juniors, but there are a ton of different opportunities to get in with the Department of State, like either as an intern, as a fellow, like if you don't want to go straight into the direct hire route. So I will say first and foremost, the Foreign Service, like being an FSO as opposed to working in civil service like in DC, being an FSO is actually like a second or third career opportunity for most people. So like the median age of a Foreign Service officer is like 30, 32 or something. So I had to take the Foreign Service test. I got invited to the oral like practicum portion, and everybody who I was there with, like there was a guy who had been like an accountant and then like I don't know, some other second career I forgot. And then he like was currently teaching physics and then decided, no, I actually want to be an FSO. So like there are different cones within it. Like there's management officers, econ officers, public diplomacy or like PR officers, and political officers. So like any one of those things, you can slot into those things as a direct hire. And then in terms of like fellowship and internship opportunities that they have for students, they have like a fellowship for like information technology professionals. So if you're into computer science, it's like, I think it's like the William D. Clark Foreign Affairs, something, whatever. Like if you're into computer science and IT, you can also join the Foreign Service. If you're into, they have like a whole department that's the Bureau of Overseas Building Operations, right? Because you need someplace to put all your like foreign affairs professionals when they get to the host country. So if you're interested in interior design, the Department of State hires interior designers to like pick what the inside of an embassy and a consulate looks like. There's also diplomatic security. So if you like, oh, great question. Direct hire, what does that mean? Are there roles that are not direct hires? Yes. So there are these jobs that are listed online with USA Jobs that I can send links to. And that means like the government is hiring you directly. The government is also a big fan of contracting work. So there are a lot of contracting agencies that offer paths like for roles at the Department of State that aren't necessarily like, it's not the government hiring you, it's a contracting agency. And so the benefits might be different, but you're still working in the Department of State, like with other foreign affairs professionals. So I worked with people who were contracting agents, but like did the same thing as everybody else in the DC office. Yes, Lauren, excellent find. The Pickering Fellowship and the Wrangell Fellowship are both for grad students. So you can apply like at any time, either like while you're completing your bachelor's or afterwards, and then they'll pay for or match your tuition for a master's degree in like some area of foreign relations. And then in exchange, you commit to joining the Foreign Service for 5 years afterwards. So like wherever you are in your like academic or professional career, and whatever your interest might be, whether they're diplomatic security or interior design for overseas building operations or plain old public diplomacy, political, whatever, like there's probably a place for you at the Department of State if it's something you're interested in. So I sound like I'm like doing a commercial for it. I'm not being paid to say this. It was just cool to work there. So yeah, I think I should probably stop talking so that you can move to other portions of the meeting. But I'm very easy to find on like LinkedIn, and Roy and Cassie both have my contact information. So if you want to talk later, whatever, I'm like happy to advise. So thank you for listening, and thank you for having me too.
Thank you, Eugenia. That was awesome. And it sounds like a really cool opportunity. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I appreciate you giving us the positives. Like the point of this is to show that there are good places to go from this voting internship experience. So we appreciate it. All right, then that's all right, Cassie, you're good. In the spirit of that, as far as things we can do as a result of this voting internship experience, we're going to have like a little mini panel with questions surrounding civic leadership off campus. So, pretty much everyone here is either here for employment or for an internship experience. And I think it's important that we take a minute to look at what we're doing here and how that applies to some other areas of life. It can be things like your daily life, it can be things like your hobbies, and it can be things like putting on your resume for overall professional development. So with that, I will pass it off to Lauren to talk a little bit about how this voting work we do plays out with local government.
Yes, thank you, Roy. So just, I guess, a little background about me. So I do work with Campus Vote Project. I work as a curriculum and research associate, as I told you earlier, but I also serve on my local city council. So I represent Ward 2 in the city of Norman, Oklahoma. And I have been on council for over 2 years. So it's been kind of a wild ride, but I made some notes so that I would not ramble on about ways that students can kind of get engaged and stay connected and learn more about local government. So the first thing that I want to share is show up to meetings. find out when your city council, or if you call them like aldermen, or some people just have county stuff. Like there's a bunch of different kind of types depending on where you live, what the structure is of your municipal government or county level. But find out when their meetings are. They are all open to the public. You can just show up. You don't have to say anything. Nobody needs to know that you're even there. You're just there to listen and kind of take it in. You're like, what does a meeting even look like? How do they structure everything? What do they talk about? Is there opportunity for public comment? And is that on specific items that they are discussing? So they want impact or feedback about the impacts of something that they're voting on. We in our meetings have a section at the end of our meeting for miscellaneous comment. So you can come up, it doesn't have to be something that's on the agenda. You can come up and say, hey, I'm really worried about X thing. And talk. We have 3 minutes at our council meetings for people to do that. Sometimes people sing us a song. Sometimes people come up and read poetry. So like it's really just like a whatever. I personally kind of enjoy the things that are different because it makes my life a little bit more interesting. But that's kind of like the first step, is just kind of entering into the space and kind of seeing what is happening there. You'll always hear building relationships with your elected officials. So emailing them and calling them, maybe not just about issues that you're angry at them about, but saying, hey, I'm really glad that you voted on X thing that I really care about. This is going to have a huge impact on, me as a student, or my family, or, whatever. And I'm not going to say that everybody is as accessible as I try to be, because, civic engagement and voting is my life's work at this point. So I really want to engage with constituents. But there's no reason why you can't email them or call them and ask for a meeting. I meet people at, a coffee shop, we have a little drink, and, I get to know more about what they care about. So like, I'm not going to say that every elected official is going to do that for you, or be open to doing those things, but it can't hurt to ask. So another thing is that if you're on your city or county's website and they have any kind of like email newsletter or alerts that you get. So our city has a kind of a news system, and it sends you an email every time that there's a press release that goes out. So it's really helpful for like road closures and upcoming projects, or, big things that the city wants you to know about. So it's a really good way outside of, just social media or what other people are saying. Sorry, Cassie, but newspapers in a lot of places are dead. So like not as many people are getting information that way. So it's a way for you to stay connected directly with kind of that communications division that's outputting information for your city. Another way to kind of get involved outside of just like starting to show up and building relationships is, once you've kind of done some of those things, people know who you are, they kind of start to know what you care about. But most, if not all, local governments have some version of boards and commissions where citizens serve in a volunteer capacity on something. Like, we have a ton of boards and commissions with our city, and our mayor appoints and our city council votes to approve the people that get appointed to those boards and commissions. So planning commission, that's a really big one that like every community pretty much has. So this is related to like zoning changes and development and different things that are coming. But we have a parks board, we have a bicycle board, we have a tree board, we have a human rights commission, we have all kinds of different kind of things in areas, of historic district commission. And some of them have requirements based on credentials and experience and things like that, because we need some expertise in different areas. But all of these boards and commissions are they recommend things to council, right? So the Parks Board is working on, our parks master plan for all of the different city parks and things like that. We have a Greenbelt Commission. There's just like all of these different places where you can kind of get involved. And it's a place where you can start to learn about what's happening at the city, but also be a part of driving some of the conversation and policy that gets implemented through the city council and through the staff. I know that we're going to talk a little bit later about volunteering, but some ways that are specific, I would say, to local government is campaigns. The local government or the local elected officials are the ones that always get forgotten. And I can't tell you how little, I guess, or how big the impact is of just like knocking doors for a candidate or being like, hey, I'm a student. My PR or my degree is or major, I guess, is getting in marketing and communications. I would love to help you with your social media or your outreach. It is such a huge impact to our local elected officials who don't have, the big campaign dollars that you're seeing at the federal level or even the state level. Especially in a college town, it also helps you build that relationship with someone who may be elected. And then you get FaceTime about the things that you care about. They hear about all of those things and then want to, run policy or implement them and make that change at the city council level. Let's see, what else did I have here? I would be remiss if I didn't talk about serving as a poll worker. So getting signed up to do that. I know Alicia does that in her community. And so working with your county election board is a great way. Maybe you can't give a full day to, being a poll worker on election day, but there are other opportunities like they need a mass amount of people to help with absentee voting, counting and things like that. So every county, every state does elections a bit differently. So you'll kind of have to figure out what that looks like for you. But that's another great way to kind of be engaged in democracy as it functions. And then also getting involved with any local activist groups that might be pushing issues that you really care about. So I'm thinking like the League of Women Voters is a great nonpartisan group that is doing stuff, or the Sierra Club is really passionate about environment and sustainability and different things like that. So if there are local chapters of those things, those are a great way to get involved. So I could talk a lot, and I know that we're running up on time, so I want to allow the other space, but I am your resident local elected official on staff at CVP. So if we have questions, you can send me a Slack or an email. I'm always happy to talk about local government. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lauren. I think Alicia put a question in the chat as far as who should run for office. Do you have any good thoughts on that one?
Anybody can run for office, but I would say I have encouraged many young people to take that leap and that jump. And I would say that, and Cassie is also a big advocate of this, is like, if you have the capacity and you have the time, while you're a student or even after, especially if you are in a college community, run, because your voice is super important in the local community. And I would say that often student voices are left out. We forget that, we have a massive population of students, and people think like, oh, they're transient. They don't live here all the time. They're here 9 months, which is just like not real. Like, we have so many students that live here 12 months of the year that are full members of our community. And even if they only live here 9 months of the year, they are a functioning member of our community. They are what make our community what it is. Like, my community is a college town. We have 130,000 people. We would not be what we are without the university, and vice versa. So students are a massive part of our community. But I would say that, anybody can run, but let's have a chat about when and why and where you're going to run and for what office. Because I think that those are really nuanced questions and, you know, kind of take some thought to think about what might be the right fit. Yes, they count towards the census.
Awesome. Any other questions for Lauren before we move on at all? All right, cool. I will then take over and move kind of briefly through what I've titled professional life, or another term of business. Nothing I have to say to you is overly profound, if I'm being perfectly honest. But what I have to say is about being cognizant and aware of what you're doing in this workspace. So like I mentioned, especially for all of you here that are doing internships, your internship is about future employment and about experiences and skills that you can learn from that. So with CVP, for example, we use the communication platform of Slack. Slack is a big professional communication tool within the business world as well. So being able to put down that you have a year's experience of Slack instead of just saying that you were, you know, a CVP SAB member or something like that, adds value to you in your future. On a slightly more obscure note is the tabling events that a lot of us have talked about today. I feel like we often think about them as just tabling events, when in reality, they are community outreach and they are event planning. So this will be two things that, you know, you hear a lot in the professional world, and having the experience of figuring out who to go to and what to say to make these events happen is crucial. And you're likely going to use that to some capacity as well in your professional life. So just like Cassie said, you're going to have resume workshops. Yeah, that is something that you should absolutely be putting in your resume. And then just to kind of tie it off with a really third key point is interpersonal communication. So according to Indeed, interpersonal communication is one of the top 5 employment skills needed in the next 10 years in the US. And I think that it's crucial to realize that what we do every day is interpersonal communication on steroids. The fact that we're meeting today from as far as Arizona to as far northeast as New York is incredible. And the technology that we have that allows us to do that and communicate with people across such a large distance is really cool. That brings value to you. It'll bring value to your workplace and to everyone you work with. So my call to action for you on this is think about this as you're going through your internship. Maybe even make some notes on your resume of things you can include that really help to showcase what you're learning here. So yeah, with that, I will pass it off to Alicia to discuss a little bit of the volunteer work that she has done surrounding student voting.
Thank you, Roy. And I will keep this very quick because I see we're approaching time. A lot of what I wanted to touch on, Lauren teed up very nicely. So thank you very much. Civic engagement in general is more than just voting. It's more than just elections. Civic engagement work encompasses so many things. Basically, if you care about your community or you care about issues in your community, there are ways to get involved that would technically count as civic engagement. So one thing I've been doing for, I think, 5 years is I am a volunteer watershed monitor. So in my community, I take samples of local streams and run little tests on them. I started that because I, am interested in oceanography and environmental science, and I care about water quality in my community. So I got involved with a local university program, not even my university. It's open to everyone. And through this monitoring program, I'm helping, make sure our community's watersheds are safe. So our drinking water is safe. And if there's problems, then the state can intervene. And that's just something that I, as a community member, can do in a volunteer capacity, a couple of Saturdays a month during 9 months out of the year. And that right there is civic engagement. I've also served as a poll worker, which, my God, we need poll workers of all ages, language abilities, technology abilities, etc. I had an amazing time serving in both the primary and the general election in my town, in my voting precinct last year, which was very special to me that I was able to serve where my neighbors vote. But I was the youngest person there by several decades, and I'm going to be honest, folks were having problems figuring out how to plug in the poll pads, which is basically an iPad. And so, like, honestly, please, if you have any sort of like language or cultural competency, or, you know, any technology abilities, please look into serving as a poll worker in your community. Like Lauren said, desperately needed. And even if you can't dedicate an entire day to doing that, there are still usually other opportunities to help. And in most communities, including mine, poll workers get paid. I think I got paid above minimum wage in my town for, you know, a couple days work plus paid training. So, and it was such a worthwhile experience as someone who does do a lot of work with elections and student voting, to have that experience from the other side of the table. And then with all that information I've learned about practical election day logistics, that's informed how I interact with folks on my campus about it and say, hey, I know this tends to be an issue if people bring this ID instead of this ID. Maybe try bringing both, or bring this one. Little things like that, having that insider information to ease the voting process for my fellow students. And another thing Lauren mentioned that I want to definitely upvote is getting involved with local organizations. They can be national organizations who have local or state level chapters like Sierra Club or League of Women Voters, ACLU chapters, NAACP chapters. There are so many local organizations that, you know, if there's an issue you care about and an issue you care about specifically in your community, see if there are orgs doing work in that area. And even if you can't dedicate a lot of your time to it, sign up for their emails. Sometimes I'll get emails from my local Audubon chapter, and they'll say, hey, we need to write our elected officials about this. Can you pitch in? And yeah, I can take 2 minutes and send something to my representative, and that helps. So definitely recommend getting involved with chapters of big national orgs, and, you know, also like local civic groups. There are Rotary clubs and public speaking clubs that I can't remember the name of, and all sorts of orgs that do things in communities. On Facebook, for instance, I see local community, like town pages, and Lauren, I love it. I see on my town pages and community Facebook groups, folks saying like, oh, hey, this bunch of us, we're all going to clean up down at the river on Saturday. If you want to come pick trash with us and do that. And then usually a lot of elected officials go to that, and other important members of the community go. So it's a great networking opportunity as well. I could go on and on about the different ways that you can get involved in your community and with issues you care about. So if you have any questions or want to talk about this after, please feel free to Slack me, email me. I'd love to talk about it. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, and I'll toss us back over to Roy.
Awesome. Thanks, Alicia. Just wanted to take a moment to ask if anyone has any questions while we're here about anything we've talked about tonight. All right, I will take that as a no, but if something comes up, feel free to let any one of us know. As we're kind of just a little bit over on time here, I'll keep it short. But just a reminder that for our SAB members, we have a meeting on, oh, Brooklyn, did you have something?
Yeah, you can finish and then I'll ask. You can keep making your statements.
Okay, I was just going to say for SAB members, we have our meeting on September 6th at 6 p.m. Central or 7 p.m. Eastern. So remember that. And then for everyone here, we do have our next SVN call on September 20th. So make sure that's on your calendars as well. And Brooklyn, what question did you have?
sorry, just when are we gonna start getting information on when like the projects are gonna start up, like the podcast research collective? 'Cause I just don't want it to spring on me too fast. I'm not aware. I just want to be able to prepare myself as a severe.
Yeah, for the projects right now, we are waiting on more responses from SAB members for those. So I sent you an email at the end of last week with a whole bunch of information about the projects and a lot of surveys to fill out. I'm sorry about its length. I know it was really annoying, but it was the best way to get you the information. So read through that, make sure you fill out the project interest survey and then the corresponding when to meet. And I'm hoping to have enough information to really get down to the nitty gritty about that during our next SAB meeting on the 6th.
I'm
All
gonna
right,
add
sounds good. Thank you.
I'm going to add a super quick housekeeping item for our student advisory board members. I am going to send you an email in response to the email I sent just a second ago. That is going to ask you to update your information. Put where you are going to be living on September 1st or around that time. Because we're going to send out some boxes to y'all from Campus Vote Project. But I need good addresses for you. So I'm going to send that your way tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, Cassie, for that. With that, my end of call action to you guys is to keep mentioning the student voting network to people. It's super cool to see a couple new faces here tonight, and it's really great to help promote some of these opportunities to students. So please, if you think of anyone that's interested, let them know about it. And if they have questions, direct them towards me. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing most of you on the 6th and all of you on the 20th.
Thank you.
And thank you again to our guest speakers for joining us. We really appreciate hearing from you.